Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and I just got back from the new film, The Great Gatsby. It's the latest film from Baz Luhrmann. It is an adaptation of the classic novel from F. Scott Fitzgerald. There have been several Great Gatsby films, and I've only seen the 70s one and the TV movie one. I've never seen the 40s one, and I can't see the silent film version, but I've seen the trailer, so that's something, I guess. I never really liked any of the Great Gatsby film adaptations, particularly the 70s film. I've never liked that film. I think this might be my favorite adaptation of the Great Gatsby so far. I don't think it's a perfect adaptation, but I like that someone came along and said, hey, why hasn't there been a big Hollywood epic version of Great Gatsby with incredible sets behind it, and the parties will be as extravagant as they sounded in the book. Baz Luhrmann really got that, and got that there had never been really a David O. Selznick level Great Gatsby ever made. There's parts of Baz Luhrmann's direction in this where it's like, wow, you researched this a lot, you seem to know so much about this period, but it also feels like you know nothing about this period. Did you just Google image search the 20s and came up with stuff and don't understand where things came from? I'm never really sure with his style, like if he knows a lot and he has this like great theory behind it, or he has no theory at all and he's a complete idiot. His own style, I think, kind of handicaps him, and it also feels a little more staler because so much of this is like he took the idea of Moulin Rouge and put that into The Great Gatsby. You look at his film like Romeo and Juliet and Moulin Rouge are very different movies. You know, you can tell they're directed by the same guy, but they're really different in the way they're made. And Great Gatsby is like too much like Moulin Rouge. This just feels like he's resting on his laurels. He has a notebook with how to structure a Baz Luhrmann movie, and he's just going to do that every time. Specifically with what he does to the Nick Carraway character. The difference between him and the book, where he's just kind of the narrator and he's telling you about his summer. In the movie, he's in a sanitarium with a doctor, and he's had all these problems since, you know, the events of The Great Gatsby had happened, and he's relating the story, and he's like, why don't you write this down in a book, my son? And it's like exactly like what happened with Ewan McGregor's character in Moulin Rouge. I think he's very lucky he had a great story to rest on. As long as he doesn't screw up the adaptation too much, he has a great story. But he's not really a great storyteller. I didn't get the sense of that from The Great Gatsby. It felt like he's kind of a lazy storyteller. He's a bit insecure at times because he has to have so much cutting and pop music and flashy things. Sometimes he moves the story along really well and really effectively, and you still get all this information from the story. Sometimes you get the pop music to really work for him. Other times it felt like maybe he's pushing it too much in there, like he's trying to get scenes to work with this pop music that otherwise wouldn't. When he had scenes that worked with music of the period, that worked a lot better than the scenes with the Jay-Z music. The whole idea seemed odd to me because Shakespeare people have adapted in so many different ways. It's really made for that. I don't know if The Great Gatsby is as universal because it's very much a period piece, and when he play into the period piece-ness of it, it works so well. There's a scene with DiCaprio's Gatsby, and he introduces himself, and this Gershwin's playing, and you know, it's totally Baz Luhrmann excess over the top, but it completely works, and it works really well, and it brought a smile to my face because Baz Luhrmann's like, you know what, who cares, let's go all out. The excess of the character, the excess of the movie, and I think it's one of the best parts of the whole movie. It pretty much personifies, you know, a Baz Luhrmann sequence. A lot of the Jay-Z stuff, calling the music out too much and not necessarily helping the scene. I think I could see what he's doing with it and what he's trying to say with that song in the scene, but I feel like he's calling out the music more than doing something with the scene. I just don't really feel like they fit necessarily. There are a lot of sequences where he did get songs and music that were not part of the period that did work, where Nick Carraway or Tobey Maguire is away from the party and you hear this bass pumping away in the party when they're in Gatsby's house, and I could really relate to that because I'm part of this modern age and I've been to a party and, you know, you're in a back room where the music isn't, you can hear the bass. There are certain scenes like that where you're like, oh, I can see what you're doing, you definitely brought me more into it and I can relate to this story more. A lot of these tendencies he has, he needs to kind of reinvent himself, like in a way that's not ripping off Moulin Rouge. The opening and the end of the movie where he has like the kind of, instead of a curtain, he has the Gatsby archways, looked exactly like the beginning of Moulin Rouge. He needs to stop it. Baz Luhrmann's not a bad director. He's like a guilty pleasure director where it's like, yeah, you have fun instincts and you can definitely do cool stuff, but he's heavy on style but not as heavy on the storytelling. And especially in this movie, this was probably like, he got away with a lot. He's a style over substance director for the most part. You know, he believes in very big universal themes to like love, but it feels more surface than I think he intends it to be. It's hard to really tell emotion when you're doing all this style and 3D. In Moulin Rouge and Romeo and Juliet, it worked very well, but if he's going to do these stories in such different ways, it would have been more interesting if he found a different way to do Great Gatsby rather than do it in a Baz Luhrmann way. There's a certain point in director's career also where they start doing themselves. They're consciously doing themselves, whereas before that was kind of their organic style. It just doesn't feel as interesting and fresh as it used to. It feels a little staler. I think this is very well cast. Specifically, DiCaprio as the Great Gatsby. I think DiCaprio was amazing as Jay Gatsby. I've never seen anyone do that part as well as DiCaprio did in this movie. He can use his movie star presence to the advantage of the character because Gatsby's supposed to be larger than life in this big character, and DiCaprio I think is very much like that, and also being very vulnerable at times and being funny and making his vulnerable parts very comedic. I thought he was really good at conveying who the Gatsby character really was. He felt almost like he was born to play Gatsby. He really like inhabited the character and got the character. And same with Tobey Maguire's Nick Carraway. Good role for Tobey Maguire. He's good at playing these bookish, humble characters like Peter Parker, and I think Nick Carraway falls into the kind of role that Tobey Maguire can play and play very well. Even if I have misgivings about what Baz Luhrmann did with the character, I don't really have misgivings about what Tobey Maguire did with the character. Most of the acting I thought was really good. I like Joel Egerton. I like Isla Fisher, who at first I didn't really think would work, but I loved her kind of New York voice. I thought was great. It's like perfect, like almost the cliche of a New York accent. The only person I really didn't like was Carey Mulligan. I didn't particularly like her portrayal as Daisy. Her voice is like, "Go Gatsby, Gatsby, you say Gatsby." She felt like a caricature. She didn't feel like a person. She just felt really overwhelmed by the part. One of the worst parts about the movie was her. I thought was too like damsel in distressy. This is, I think, probably my favorite adaptation of The Great Gatsby, but I don't think it's a great movie. It's a fun kind of gaudy, over-the-top big Hollywood film, and we don't get enough of that. I read this quote from this critic, Scott Ewenberg, and he said, "I'm glad we have Baz Luhrmann. It's like Hollywood knew we needed a gay Michael Bay." How you see a Michael Bay movie and you know Michael Bay is not a good director. You know he can certainly do things that are very impressive and really cool, but he's not a good storyteller. It's kind of like a guilty pleasure to see his movies. They kind of go in one ear and come out the other. And I feel the same way about Baz Luhrmann. He's so into his little niche and his style, and he'll never get out of it. It's not a great movie. I don't think it's as good as Romeo and Juliet or Moulin Rouge, and certainly not as memorable. So if you have seen The Great Gatsby and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments, and subscribe if you would like to.